Hello, so welcome to the Crown Estate webinar this morning. We've got an hour and a half, and I'm just going to pop up the agenda just briefly so you can see how the morning is going to be. So Annie and Mercedes are going to go through the Community Capacity Grants programme, give you more information about this, and then we'll hear from Danny from Love Oor Lang Toun, who's just completed a project funded through this programme, and then we'll have a good amount of time at the end for questions and answers, and we'll finish up at 11:30. So I'm going to pass you on to Annie now. Just share the screen. Is that the screen shared now?
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
So thank you, Pamela, and to DTAS for hosting this webinar today. Hopefully you'll get lots of useful information in it. So I'm Annie Breaden. I'm Head of Policy at Crown Estate Scotland, and I sort of have responsibility overall for our Sustainable Communities Fund. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of a little bit of Crown Estate Scotland, a little bit of the fund, and then later I'll hand over to Mercedes, who'll sort of go through the detail with you. So next slide, please. So I don't know if anybody knows anything about Crown Estate Scotland. You may do, you may not. So we're still quite a young organisation. We were established in 2017, and we're governed by our 2019 Scottish Crown Estate Act. And you can see here the quote is from Scottish Government's Strategic Management Plan for the estate. And this sort of refers to delivering these sort of wider benefits for Scotland and its communities. And so our Sustainable Communities Fund is one of our sort of key mechanisms for doing this. So the revenues that we get from various sort of leasing activities, for example, offshore wind has been a big sort of headline recently, and we sort of are able to put some of this revenue back to sort of wider communities in Scotland. And next slide, please. So this is just an excerpt really from our corporate plan, in case you want to know a bit more about us. Our corporate plan is available on our website, and this is our 5 strategic objectives. So we lease seabed for aquaculture projects, for renewable energy projects, for cables and pipelines, things like that. And then we have 4 rural estates in Scotland. And so overall, what we're looking to do is support communities who are close to our estate, really. So you don't have to be on our estate, but close to it. And so given that we manage all of the seabed, that's why there's the link to coastal communities, and then there's the link to within the radius of our rural estates. Next slide, please. And so finally, so our Sustainable Communities Fund, this is a 3-year programme. This is us into year 3 now. So when we launch in August, that will be year 3. Within the fund, we've got 2 grant streams. We've got environment grants we have £100,000 total per year for that. But these are open to our tenants only. These are for projects delivering sort of specific environmental grants. So over the last couple of years, we've funded a wide variety of things. So it's really great to see all these different projects. So we've had sort of biodiversity planting, electric vehicle charging points, different types of sort of litter picks, and all sorts of different things, but which are just really specifically for environmental
Thanks, Annie. So yeah, as it was mentioned, my name is Mercedes. I'm a funds advisor at Foundation Scotland, and I'm going to be taking you through the Community Capacity Grants Programme. Just as a reminder, if you're interested in the Environment Grants Programme that is administered by Crown Estate Scotland, so if you have any questions on that specific area of the fund, you'll need to kind of sort of direct your queries towards Crown Estate. But yeah, as Annie mentioned, if you could just move to the next slide, Pamela. Lovely. So yeah, it was previously mentioned that essentially this fund is, it aims to provide early stage financial support for community enterprise projects. You'll note that there are essentially sort of two key pillars to the programme. The first one being to contribute to the regeneration of places through improvements to buildings or community spaces, making these places more attractive, accessible and beneficial to the community. And then the second pillar of the programme is to contribute to the regeneration of places, but with the aim of supporting a self-sustaining community enterprise that delivers sustainable development. So just to echo Annie's words, this is sort of an ideas-based fund, early stage financial support, but looking towards kind of long-term regeneration in communities across Scotland. If we could just move. Lovely. So yeah, it was had a brief overview of the programme from sort of its early days in 2020. As it was mentioned, it proved to be very popular, especially amongst development trusts and community groups from across Scotland. So in last year, the second year of the programme took place, and just looking at those last 2 years, some data for you that might be interesting. So since the launch of the programme, Crown Estate Scotland has awarded over £400,000 in grants to organisations across Scotland. On average, a total grant of around 25,000 was awarded to each organisation. Of course, this varies across different projects. And based on the projected numbers of community members and application forms, It's projected that over 80,000 community members will directly benefit from project activities across Scotland. Interestingly, funding has been distributed to 6 of the 32 local authorities in Scotland. And whilst this number might appear low, I'm going to go into sort of the geographic criteria of the fund. So obviously it's open to coastal communities and those within the Crown estates. If we just move on. So just following on from what I just mentioned, there are a few points that I wanted to mention. The first being, and it's been mentioned before, that this is essentially a place-based funding programme and clear geographic boundaries do apply. So to be an eligible applicant to the fund, organisations must be working to support communities in either those situated 5 miles off the coast or estuarine foreshore, or organisations that are within 5 miles of one of Crown Estate Scotland's 4 estates, which is outlined below. If you are unsure about whether you meet the eligibility criteria, especially if you think you're within the 4 estates, if you go onto our funding page, I'll provide a link in a follow-up email. We do have a link to all of the maps with the specific boundaries involved, so you can take a look. Again, if you're a bit unsure about how we measure the distance from the coast, then please feel free to email me and I can do a check for you. But essentially, just to bring it home, for place-based funds, we can't support projects which don't benefit the people who live within the defined funding area. So before you submit an expression of interest, just please make sure that your organisation meets the eligibility criteria. And again, if you're a little bit unsure, just feel free to send me an email. The second thing that I wanted to mention, and I know that we've kind of brought up this word of development before throughout the presentation, but it is important to note that the programme is intended to be developmental and has been designed to provide revenue to support first stage investment for local projects. So just examples of what the fund is looking to support could be, but this is not kind of exhaustive, salary costs for new posts, feasibility studies, business plan development and community consultation activities, as well as building warrants. I think the most important thing to mention is that the fund cannot support capital costs. So if your organisation, for example, has a community space and you've already gone through the sort of planning stage and you've talked to the community and now you're ready to sort of put down actual construction work, unfortunately, the fund would not be able to support that application. So if your project is at the construction phase, it is advised that you refrain from submitting an application to the fund. Moving onwards. So I just wanted to take you through a few of the different projects that we've had over the years. I personally find it quite useful to actually see what's going on the ground and see how your project might fit in with these. You'll note that the ones that I'm going to talk about, there's a big variety of the activities that are going on. All the projects are very different from one another, but this is just a handful of projects that were awarded grant funding in the last 2 years. So the first spotlight that I wanted to talk about was Edinbain Community Company. This is a small community organisation up on the Isle of Skye, and they were awarded grant funding last year in the second year of the programme. So they essentially were awarded grant monies to undertake a feasibility project, which explored the possibility of developing a vacant village shop. The project, called the Edinbain Centre, seeks to breathe new life into the former village shop and petrol station, and this was acquired by the company in 2020. So essentially they've got this sort of empty community space. They've not touched it, they've not done any work to it, but they're at the stage where they're thinking about what they want to do with it. So the ultimate vision for the project is to redevelop the site into a community-run facility, offering a range of services to local residents and, importantly, tourists. That includes food shops, post office, cafe, retail, craft gallery, toilets, campervan waste disposal. They're envisaging that it's going to be very much a multifaceted sort of venue that will perform a lot of different roles. But I think very importantly, and just going back to what Annie was saying, essentially their final vision is that it will be owned and operated by the community as a self-sustaining community enterprise. So this is just one sort of example of a community having a vacant space, and they really tied in the issues around heightened levels of tourism and congestion in the local community and the impact that that was having on local residents. And they developed a project around that. If we move further up the coast, we have Skyri Community Development Company in the northwest of Scotland. This is a relatively small community, but again, in the second year of the programme, they were awarded grant monies to do an entirely different project from the one I've just mentioned. And this was to commission a feasibility study into the recommended routes for possible seaweed processing, harvesting, and/or sinking in the coastal waters around the community. So they've sort of recognised that that there's an asset within the local community, and they want to kind of explore how they can use that. They're using the grant monies to essentially hire some professional contractors and get some scientific expertise to study and assess the viability of actually setting up a seaweed farm. And again, similar to the last project, the ultimate vision is that that eventual site would fall under a community-owned company. And unlike the last project that was kind of built around issues with tourism, this project actually wanted to alleviate several issues that affect that specific community in Sutherland, namely sort of massive levels of depopulation, a lack of employment opportunities for young people, exodus of working age residents. So they really want to attract families and sort of young professionals to come back into the community and undertake these jobs around sustainability. If we move on to the next one, I think we have South Isla Development here today. I did notice them potentially in the chat. This is a project from the first year of the programme. Again, another coastal community over in Argyll and Bute. And this project, unlike the first two, focused on issues around childcare facilities with island communities. And the lack of childcare facilities in those areas is actually having a knock-on effect with depopulation. And it's sort of failing to attract working age families and residents to come to the island as a place to live. So similar to the first project, this organisation had sort of identified a sort of building in the community that could perform the role of being a childcare facility, and they used monies to develop a business plan, engage with the local community, and then they also worked closely with the local council's early years team to support the creation of a new community facility. And now they're sort of one step ahead towards looking at actually redeveloping that building for the future. And then I think we have, last but not least, we have UOG in the Western Isles. This was a project from the second year of the programme, an entirely different one altogether. This one focused around lighthouse development, which is something that we have actually seen quite a bit with the proposals coming through. So this is a coastal community right on the butt of Lewis, and they have a vacant lighthouse with the adjoining buildings that they can use for potential redevelopment. And they're looking at how to sort of develop this facility for the benefit of the community and for local tourists. So they are looking at reviewing their existing tourism strategy, they're doing some community consultation work, and they're developing possible proposals for actual renovation with the help of architects and that kind of thing. If you are interested in seeing the other projects that have been funded, you'll note that there's a link at the bottom of this slide. I can always pop it in a follow-up email, but if you want to see all the projects and where grant monies are going, then please feel free. If we move on. So this is sort of going to encapsulate this year of the programme. I'll be talking about some application requirements, timelines, that sort of thing. So as it was mentioned, 2022 will see the third year of the programme. Annie mentioned that £250,000 will be made available, and organisations are invited to request grants in the range of £20,000 to £50,000. Please note that that 20 is the sort of the lower figure. So if you submitted a grant request for, say, £5,000, that would be deemed sort of ineligible within the programme rules. Another thing to mention is in the second year of the programme, not least because of COP26 happening in Glasgow, but also because of the kind of current climate emergency, we asked applicant organisations to demonstrate how net zero considerations will be incorporated into the project. And this is something that we're continuing on with. I'm sure we've all seen over the last week that the climate emergency is here in the UK and it's happening now. So we are kind of still keeping this sort of pillar of the programme in. So in terms of what that actually means about demonstrating net zero considerations, this will kind of vary from project to project. And I've just popped here that we anticipate that this will come in different forms. So for example, where funding is sought for the development of a feasibility or business plan, applicants might want to include a commitment for the plan to consider emissions associated with the project. Or alternatively, net zero could be a central feature of a project. So similar to that seaweed farm development project, community enterprises providing sustainable forms of travel in rural areas or developing local service provisions and reducing the need to travel. Again, that's not exhaustive. So it's really about kind of thinking how you can integrate net zero into all of your project activities. If we move onwards. So this is a sort of particularly important slide. I'm sure you're all going to make notes here. I will pop everything in a follow-up email. But I just wanted to walk you through the key timelines of the programme and also the process by which you can apply. So like the previous years, there's essentially a two-step stage with the application process. And this has been developed because the programme is highly sort of oversubscribed and very popular. So in terms of dates to remember, the fund is going to launch on Thursday, the 18th of August, and this is open for expressions of interest. When I talk about expressions of interest, I essentially mean it's sort of a consolidated application form where organisations are invited to sort of outline their key ideas for the project, but not necessarily provide loads and loads of information. We'll close the expression of interest applications on Monday, the 19th of September. And all of this will be kind of, you'll be able to complete this on an online portal, so you won't have to print anything out or anything like that. And then due to the sort of popularity of this fund, we move to the second stage, which is we invite a sort of short list of the strongest expression of interests to a full application. And that will be on Friday, the 14th of October. And by full application, I mean that it will sort of elaborate on the expression of interest, but organisations will also be asked to fill out a sort of work plan for the 12 months and also kind of outline a budget spreadsheet so they can describe where possible fundings would go. The submission deadline for full application will be Monday, the 21st of November. And then once those submissions are all in, we'll move into the assessment process over sort of December, January, February. And then decisions to applicants will be released in March 2023. I did want to clarify that when I say decisions to applicants, that will be for those invited to the final sort of application process. If you've submitted an expression of interest, you don't have to wait all the way till March to find out, don't worry. You'll be notified in October. So these are sort of the 5 key dates that you'll need to remember. If you have any questions about this, just please pop it in the chat. So just before we do a question and answer session, I'm going to hand over to Danny, who was a first-year grantee under the programme, and he's going to do a little bit of a spotlight on his completed project. So I'll mute myself and Danny, you can take it away.
Okay. Thanks, Mercedes. I will try and get this up on the screen. Does everybody see that? Yeah? Good. Okay. So I've been told strictly within 15 minutes, so I'll get going and I might rush through this. But so thanks for this opportunity. My name's Danny Cepok. I'm the development manager for Love Oor Lang Toun. Love Oor Lang Toun was formed about 2020. It was initially a response to supporting local businesses through COVID. However, the other issue that we'd had was that even before COVID, Kirkcaldy town centre, which used to be a really thriving town centre in its day, a lot of the big nationals and corporates had pulled out of it, and we had a number of what we could just describe as big empty buildings, and the high street was looking pretty bad, to be honest. So Kirkcaldy, just in case anybody doesn't know, Kirkcaldy is on the Fife coast, just across the estuary from Edinburgh. And the reason we're called Love Oor Lang Toun is Kirkcaldy has had the nickname for a few centuries of being the Lang Toun, because it was a very long town. So what happened to Kirkcaldy? What happened to Kirkcaldy has probably happened to town centres up and down Scotland and the rest of the UK. So started with small units being emptied, shuttered up. You can see this one here. This was the old body care unit. This has been empty for at least 2 or 3 years. And the venal down the side, which takes you down to the waterfront. You can see bins lying around here. So when shops close, it's not just the shop or unit itself, it's the impact it has in the surrounding area as well. Moving on to larger places, this COVID vaccine centre was actually Marks and Spencer's. The NHS managed to get a lease from them. Good place to have a vaccine centre in the middle of the town centre, but they've gone now, so we're left with the building. This is British Home Stores. It's been lying empty for years. Debenhams just before COVID, it was going to close down anyway. This beautiful building here was Burton's. And of course, Burton's collapsed with the whole of the Arcadia group. And this nice corner building here, which is a great view down to the sea, used to be a Polish restaurant, had to close for COVID, and like a lot of businesses, never opened up again. So we're kind of left with a high street that had a lot of empty space and it was not looking great. So our vision was to create, and clearly the high street had to change because these big companies were never coming back. So our vision was to create a 21st century Kirkcaldy town centre that local people would be proud of. And with three kind of quickly, our strategies were that town centre vision, creating a vision. And instead of describing these sites as dilapidated or vacant sites, we called them opportunity units. And to look at what is the opportunity we can get here from these sites. And this concept of developing the urban village, which was very popular with planners in the 70s and 80s, but this idea of what if we thought the town centre as being a village on the side of the town, rather than just being the town centre. A couple other things we do is we focus on the local economy. We're interested in community wealth building and obviously encouraging shop local, and how we develop as a community organisation as well, because we are a community organisation and we're community led, and we want to keep that and have at our core the idea of what we're doing is we're working with the local people to see how we move our town centre forward. I'm just going to focus on this bit, the town centre vision. So a modern town centre, independent shops, cafe culture, market spaces, living space, active waterfront, less reliance on retail, and a much more different type of town centre, a lot of different activities. We decided we'd do that by identifying key sites, these buildings I talked about, and how we were going to do that. There was already a town centre design and development framework. That's the thing that the planners use if they're doing work in the town centre. It's actually quite flexible, which is helpful. And we wanted to carry out that high-level feasibility study around key sites in the town centre. And not just do the feasibility study, but engage the community in that as well. It was at that time that, fortunately, that Crown Estates went through their first tranche of the community capacity building grants, and we applied and we were successful. We didn't get everything that we'd asked for, because, as we said, it was a lot of applicants, so we were lucky, we did well. But it was enough to get us going, and we were able to commission ARPL architects who actually just won a Design Scotland Award this year for the work they're doing in Mid-Steeple Quarter in Dumfries. So we called the project The Future Is Now, and what we got the architect to do was, after talking to us and him doing a bit of a survey, we wanted them to do some visuals so that we could go out to people and show them what I like to call the art of the possible. So he did something. Now this actually is Kirkcaldy High Street, but if you can see here, he's kind of superimposed about what could be done. One of the things he found out for us is that over 50% of the properties above the retail level actually lie empty. There's nothing happening in them at all. And that's a lot of living space that could be brought back into use. The reason that's happened is because developers just focused on retail. Brought in some ideas of what could be done. There's an indoor market. There's an idea, a nice waterfront. He did other visuals to give, again, people a sense of how that fits into the bigger picture. And here's Katie and I, my colleague at the time, going out and doing the consultation. And what we did is, because we have an artisan market in Kirkcaldy every Friday, so we took a stall at the artisan market and then just put up all these visuals there. We also got to go into the Mercat, which is the big shopping centre in Kirkcaldy, and we were allowed to put our visuals up there as well. So we spoke basically with over 200 people in 4 consultation events, and we spoke people face to face, and these were very, very rich conversations. And of course, in this world of keyboard warriors, it's really good to actually talk through with people what they want to see. We had a special event with local businesses, and we did also do an online consultation on the website. We had the analysis from that done independently, and it was by a local student in her 3rd year. He was doing politics and social studies and was actually doing a dissertation on town centre. So that was ideal. But we thought that was important because you know what consultation's like. You tend to have a tendency to look for the feedback you want to see. So we thought it was important that somebody independent that hadn't been involved had a look at it. From what we've got from that, we're going to consult on a draft vision statement, go back to the community because that's good community engagement practice before we then have the final document. And I'll show you some of the visuals that are in the final document. What people were saying, I'll just go through this quickly. There are 4 kind of areas that were covered. People want to see entertainment down at the town centre. A cinema, we've not had a cinema in Kirkcaldy for 20 years. The nearest one's in Dunfermline, it's 14 miles away, and transport there is just awful. So for a lot of young people, you know, it's no good for them. Again, indoor bowling, kind of mini golf, things that people have seen elsewhere, and a lot more coffee culture. They want to see more happening they want to see more independent retail, and independent retail really developing now in Kirkcaldy. Something about the history and culture of the town, and an active seaside waterfront. Again, a lot of stuff around the environment. People want to see more green space, play parks. They want to see that living space turned into social housing, flexible workspaces, and as you would imagine, better accessibility, public transport links, cycle lanes. And this came up a lot, a family-friendly town centre. Supervised play spaces, pram-friendly cafes, dog-friendly cafes, which just seemed to, dog ownership just seems to have really, really risen. And a lot of dog owners like the idea of being able to take their dog with them, because there's still quite a lot of places not letting them do that. So I'll quickly show you some of what the architect did, if I could get to it. So this is where I say, bear with me, caller. Hang on, here we go. It did work. So how much longer have we got, Pamela?
Do you know what? We're ahead of time, so you can take your time, loads of time.
Thanks for that. Right, so I'll show you how the architect did this. So we'll start with
Danny, I think we're still on the presentation screen.
Are we? Oh, right. Okay, right. Bear with me. I think this would be the best way to do this. Right, how's that? Does it say opportunity sites?
Yeah.
Great, okay, thanks for that, Mercedes. So there's 4 kind of sites, a small, medium, large, and an extra large, which is basically the waterfront. And the way the architect put this together, and so we'll go back to this body care shop. This is what it looks like now. You would do a floor plan, show you what it's like inside, so you can see it's pretty grotty. If you know anything about retail units, if they lie empty for more than 6 months, they just fall apart. The roof starts to cave in, there's leaks, they look absolutely grotty, they're terrible. So he then produces a plan of what we could use the space for. But we like this, he does these 3D cutouts. And we find this stuff really useful because people tend to be visual. And if you just throw a whole load of architects' plans at people, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to them, but stuff like this does. And what was interesting when he did this, you'll notice that down the venue, he put in this idea of having windows and doorways. So what he then does, he does this montage of what it looks like. So this is what it's like just now, but this is probably what we could look like. And you could see what a difference that makes. I mean, this venue down here suddenly becomes a much more interesting place. You can imagine people drawn into it. And if you actually walk down here, it takes you to the leisure centre and the waterfront. So this is the kind of possibilities we were trying to demonstrate to people about what could be done with the high street and how we move forward. And a lot of this was feedback from them. The medium space is this building. This is like 2 doors up. We're very interested in this building, actually. So again, it's a big, long retail unit, but it's got this beautiful sandstone building at the top with these, I've got to say, these gorgeous windows and this dormer up here. So again, stuck, right. So that dormer, that's what it looks like from the inside, and that's the floor below. And while this looks like pretty awful, structurally, this building's sound. And these spaces can really be converted back into living space. The only problem with that is there's no access to it. We had to get into this space by climbing up. The owner took us round and he got us to climb up this rickety ladder that I think he bought from Coco the Clown. And we had to go through a kind of hatch and climb our way through and then get up to see these upper floors. But the potential, again, is fantastic. We're in discussions with the council just now and tentatively looking at a partnership project and creating an enterprise hub. And this room above would create a great kind of conference room, meeting room, and then the 2 floors above would be a duplex apartment. So again, same sort of thing, floor plans, but then you get the cutout of what it could look like. And one of the things, so a couple of things I should mention, this is actually a lift, which we said we really need to do that. So some of our core principles, one is about accessibility, it's got to be accessible to all. And another principle, which you might see in another drawing, is that, again, is about climate change and what could we do with these buildings to get them as carbon neutral as possible. Interestingly, part of a problem with Kirkcaldy Town Centre, and I think in a few other town centres, because they've got such a lot of old buildings, they're in conservation areas. And then you start to get into problems about doing things of looking like at solar panels, stuff like that. So, but however, we'll get there. So this is the duplex apartment. Just to tell you, this window here at the back, it looks right across the 4th to Edinburgh. The views are fantastic. This is Marks and Spencer's. I get big 4 floors, 5,000 square meters, huge space. This is what it's like inside. This is the first floor. That was a storage area. There was offices at the top. Again, architect's idea based on what people were saying, an indoor market. Maybe this is a basement and a loading bay, turn it into a cinema, and this would be maker spaces at the top. So again, nice cutout, kind of permanent stalls, but also looking at things, indoor leisure in this big space. And also something like maybe like a gin distillery. We've got a coffee roaster in Kirkcaldy who wants to come into the town centre. An artisan bakery could be set up there. Did I mention the gin distillery? Yeah, probably did. So a lot of good ideas around this. That's the maker spaces at the top. And this is the idea for the cinema. I'm meeting with the architect tomorrow. We're not so keen in the 3-screen cinema. What we're thinking about is a single screen cinema here, almost like a boutique style cinema, and maybe like a kind of bar lounge area here. And this is the sort of stuff that helps the evening economy. So you can imagine go to the cinema, go out to dinner, or go out to dinner, go out to the cinema, have a wee drink first. That's, you know, so these things are really important to get people thinking about how we can revive the town centre. And finally, there's a lot of projects here, but this is the waterfront in Kirkcaldy. It's about a mile long. There's a lot of work being done at the waterfront in the past, but like a lot, well, I've seen other towns where if it has a high street next to a waterfront, all the buildings face into the high street. So what we've got is a lot of kind of backs of buildings facing out to the waterfront, and a lot of a few derelict spaces here. Again, things people told us, could we have our town looking like a seaside town? Where's the ice cream shop? Where's the waterfront cafe? Where's the bucket and spade shop? So the architect came up with ideas like, this is a common idea you've probably seen before, using old containers. But what we want to see is, as these being set up, these ones have got solar panels. We probably think about, could we put batteries in them? But to create low cost, low lease units that, so if somebody was wanting to start a small business, want to try a wee cafe or a coffee shop in the waterfront, they could try it for a summer and see how it works out for them. And they might want to stay there, or they might want to do something else. But it's that idea of encouraging a bit of entrepreneurship. So a whole lot of other ideas. I'll just show you this one. This is a place called Volunteers Green. And this bit actually is a car park just now. But it's a big green area, beautiful area, hardly gets used. Nobody's really using it because there's not much happening there. And again, we've got this idea of creating like an open air stage, keeping this kind of X, which is in the green, but putting in kind of much better features, this kind of land flooring play area that kids could play on. It could be a multi-purpose event space. You could also have kind of wee festivals or a beer festival or something there. So again, it's imaginative use of space and flexible use of space as well. So I'll finish up just by saying this has been really useful for us. We've had such great feedback from the public, and I could say to you that this grant kind of took us from a sense of despair about the town centre to a bit of vision and hope for the future. And what we want to do with this vision document is then be able to use that as a way of getting funding to do some of these projects, but also hoping to try and interest some investors as well into the town centre. We had a couple of great side effects from this. One is our board expanded because there was a lot of people got interested and a lot of local businesses got interested. So we've got a really good community-based board. And the other thing I would say is it raised our profile, not just at Love Oor Lang Toun, but at Kirkcaldy generally. And these 6 photographs I showed you at the beginning, I could tell you that 3 of these buildings have now been tenanted or taken over and have been turned into something useful, including the big Burton's building. So we think we're definitely getting there. It will be kind of a bit of a long journey, but this has been a great starting point from us, and I'm sure it will help us move on from here. So thanks all for listening to our story, and do come to Kirkcaldy and we'll be happy to show you around.
Thank you, Danny. Can you unshare? Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Just before I do the kind of general question and answer, I wondered if anyone had any questions for Danny. Feel free to unmute yourself or pop it in the chat. If not, can I ask Pamela to share the screen and then I'll go back to, you've got some great comments coming through. Lovely. So I'm just going to go through question and answers. And before I take anything from the audience, there's a lot of sort of commonly asked questions that I wanted to answer prior. A few people emailed me or emailed Pamela, sorry, before the event with some specific questions. So if they are not too specific to your organisation, I might answer them now. If not, please don't worry, I'll always send you a follow-up email. I think Moffat Town Centre emailed quite a specific question, so I'll respond to them individually. So if we just move on to the next slide. So again, some frequently asked questions that we get for every year of the fund. The first one being, do I have to have match funding? By match funding, I mean, do I have to apply to other funding organisations to seek monies for shortfalls, etc.? The answer is no, the programme can fully fund applications to 100%. However, if the cost of the overall project is higher than the maximum grant size, you will of course require additional funding, and we would expect to see if this has been secured or else you've applied as part of our assessment process. Next question we have is, does the programme fund staffing costs? I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but just to clarify, under the eligibility criteria, the programme can fund salary costs associated with new staffing posts, which is an important sort of criteria to remember. So several developmental projects have supported the employment of housing development officers or community engagement officers whose role is specifically required for the project at hand. In regards to staffing costs, there's some additional information on the website, but we do ask that you are in line with the national living wage requirements for sort of hourly rates. And then in the budget spreadsheet, you'll be sort of asked about the number of hours or the kind of contract that this individual might be on for, say, a week or month, how many months they would be employed as part of the project. Next one is the programme open to organisations of all sizes, e.g. is there an income cap? The answer is yes. So unlike a number of funding programmes at Foundation Scotland where we have sort of annual income caps, there is no cap and organisations of any size can submit an application. And I think it was sort of highlighted earlier, but does the programme fund legal consultancy costs? The answer is yes. The programme can fund legal and consultancy support should you require specialist support to undertake project activities. Lovely. If we move onwards, I can see that Sheena's just asked, if awarded a grant, is it paid in advance? Yes, so it's not a retrospective funding. You'll be awarded your grant and then you'll have 12 months to complete project activities. It should be noted as well that unlike a lot of big funding organisations, we don't expect to see sort of, you know, detailed invoices. You don't have to send us electricity bills or anything like that. We would distribute the grant funding before the project starts. Anybody have any other questions? Can you submit more than one application? Good question. So previously we have had kind of multiple applications from one organisation, but I think it's important to mention that given how popular the programme is and how sort of oversubscribed it can be, we would recommend that you kind of aim to submit one really strong application rather than multiple ones. Let me just take a look in the chat. If you needed specific surveys of a building, would these costs be eligible? Yes, so we the programme can fund surveys. It can also fund building warrants as well. Obviously, just nothing connected to capital costs. Can this fund support existing staff posts? So primarily it is to fund new staff posts. If, however, sort of a proportion of an existing staff post is, there's, I don't know, 2 hours of the week for this existing staff member is used to do community consultation, then it could do that, but it needs to be proportionate to the project. It's not about sort of supporting just the core costs of an organisation. It has to be centred around the developmental project itself. Where can we check about geographic eligibility? So I'll pop the link in the chat, but essentially on the Foundation Scotland funding page for Crown Estate Scotland, we have the 4 maps for the Crown Estate Scotland estates with the boundaries. If you are potentially an organisation that is based on a coastal sort of area and you're not sure if you fit within the 5 miles, the best thing to do in that case is to just send me your postcode, and then I can perform a check and let you know if you would be eligible. Debbie's asked, if there was a partnership of several organisations in an area, could we submit a joint application? So we have had previous applications in the past. The organisation that submitted the proposal for the seaweed farm, for example, were planning to work sort of in partnership with another sort of adjoining community and their community development trust. You would just have to have, it couldn't be sort of, the application couldn't come from a consortium. You would need to have one organisation submit the proposal. And I guess it also depends on the number of communities that you would plan to involve in that project. So I think the best case in terms of planning and coming up with ideas would maybe just to have a little think, and then I'm always free to, you can always kind of give me a ring or send me an email and we can talk through project ideas. We have another question on, please can you explain the process for submitting an expression of interest? Is there an application form or template? Yeah, so the expression of interest will be completed online. On launch day for the expression of interest, if you scroll down on the funding page, there's a link where you can click to access the form. It's an online form. It looks very similar to all of our other application forms. It's just a little bit smaller. And you'll just be asked a sort of variety of questions, which I can provide you a brief sort of information on. So the purpose of your organisation, how you feel your project fits with one or both of the programme objectives, a brief description of project activities, what you plan to spend the money on, and how will the local communities stand to benefit from the project. But with the expression of interest, you won't be required to fill out a budget spreadsheet, a work plan, that sort of thing. It's just a smaller version of the form. Colin's got his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for all the information. Just thinking about smaller community. So is the fund thinking about staffing costs for development people? Does the fund support like multi-year part-time work as opposed to, you know, a very short term? Is there a term limit on the support?
Yeah, so within programme rules, funding needs to be used within a 12-month period.
All right, okay. So that it's just for awareness. So that doesn't always fit very small communities. So we're really biasing this against small communities by setting the lower limit at 20,000 or setting an upper time limit for the use of the money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, completely.
Because I'm thinking that this is irrelevant for a small community. Yeah, I happen to be a member of the Crowley, or a tenant of the Crowley Estates.
Right. Okay.
So comment. Okay.
No, welcome.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions? If something pops into your head after this event, just please send me an email. I'll provide all the information in a follow-up. Lovely. I can see a few of you are having to pop off. We have finished ahead of time. I'll just hand back to Pamela.
Thank you very much, Mercedes, and thank you to Annie and to Danny as well. That was fantastic. Oh, there's one more question there from Debbie about the projects will run from April 2023. Is that right? Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah.
If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to pop them in an email to Mercedes. And as I said, we will put this whole recording onto YouTube channel probably next week. And thank you everyone for attending. We finished early. Thank you. Thanks. Bye everyone.